You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me, the dream team back together this week. It is the Darts statistician, Burton, DeWitt. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, not having to watch football this evening, unlike some of us, so I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, for now I'm doing all right when we are recording it. Made it back from our trip to Manchester for the Premier League last week, and thanks to everyone who listened to our show last week. If you haven't, we did have that chat with the PDC Chief Executive, Matt Porter, so do go and listen to that if you haven't done already. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the Premier League later on. Plus, we're going to be joined by two guests, George Killington, who I had the pleasure of chatting with when he signed for Mission Darts last Thursday, so you're going to hear from him later on. Also, the CEO of the Championship Darts Corporation, Peter Citera, is going to be calling in as well. So lots to bring you, but let's start the show with a look back at the ProTour action over the last 2 days, and starting off with Monday's events in Leicester. Chris Dobey picking up the Players' Championship 7 title, beating Josh Rock in the final. And on to our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts. Who will be higher ranked on the PDC Order of Merit at the end of the season, Chris Dobey or Josh Rock? What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because last year was definitely a bit of a regression for Josh Rock, but not one of those that we would say is a worry. It was one of those fairly normal second-year slumps that we've seen some players have after a big breakout year, including some of the all-time greats. Even Raymond van Barneveld, after he switched over to the PDC, had a phenomenal first year, won the UK Open, won Vegas, won the World Championships. He did win another major the following year, but it wasn't nearly the same as his first year. It happens because it's tough, especially after such a good year, to improve on that. Even Luke Humphries, after he had his breakthrough year making a major final, regressed a little bit the next year. Michael Smith last year is another good example, although obviously, he had been around at the top of the game for a long time. It's normal. It happens. But it wasn't all that bad, and he started to find some of his game in the second half of the year. This year, though, it looks like Josh Rock is back playing near where he was in his first year on tour. Still maybe a little bit behind, but moving in the right direction. So far this year, he's 23rd in averages in the Players' Championship events, but it's a little bit lower than what he looked like the past couple days. We're recording on Tuesday. You're probably listening a couple days after that. So this is now a few days ago by now. But across 11 matches on Monday and Tuesday, he averaged over his seasonal average in 8 of them. And a lot of those were significantly above his season average. In fact, all of the ones that were above were significantly above. They were all at least 2.5 points above his average. It wasn't like he was just nipping it out. No, he was well above his seasonal average in 8 of the 11 matches. And in 2 of the 3 that he was below it, he was only slightly below it. Only that last match against Jean Van Veen did he really have a poor performance, and one that was out of step. So his game is definitely moving in the right direction. And he had some tough matchups on the way to that final. Nathan Aspinall, who's obviously in form. Ryan Searle, who's playing really well. In the last 32 and the last 16. Those are tough players to go against, especially when you're still trying to build your season, especially when in the previous week of Players' Championship events, you lost first round in both of them. And to get past them and to make that deep run was big. But that said, I don't think he's playing at the same level as Chris Dobey. I think Chris Dobey is not just a player who right now is looking like he wants to get back in the Premier League. He looks like a player who wants to really challenge the best players in the world day in, day out, and he's doing it. And he said it in his interview after winning the title. He's number 3 in the stable right now, but he doesn't want to be that also-ran. He wants to be the 3rd among equals. And the way he's playing, he's not that far off of it. So far this year in Players' Championship events, he's 4th in averages. behind only Gary Anderson, Gerwin Price, and Mike DeDecker. And his 33 matches played so far this year is the second most of anyone. Only Ryan Searle has played more matches so far in Players' Championship events, which means he's not just playing a lot of matches and not just playing very well. He's also going deep more often than anyone else. He's made at least the board final all but once. He's won his board 4 times so far this year, and he capped it off with a title where he beat Michael Smith with a 109 average. He beat Kim Hybrex, who threw a 105 against him in that match. He beat Stephen Bunting the following day on Tuesday, coming from 5-3 down, winning the last 3 legs of that match to steal victory. Stephen Bunting was averaging 112 for most of that match, and Chris Dobey waited till Bunting didn't fall completely off. He still averaged 106.5, but fell off just a little bit to pinch himself back into the game, survived 1 missed dart at tops, and took it out. Chris Dobey looks like a major champion. He looks like the player who last year was the most consistent on television, which led to him winning a major. When you factor in both that consistency and that class and the fact that it looks like he's just found that little bit more, it's going to require Josh Rock to get not just to where he was when he was at his best 2 years ago, but to get even beyond that if he's going to reel in Chris Dobey. Of course it can happen, and all it would require is one big run on television. There's only 30,000 pounds between him in the postseason order of merit. But Chris Dobey looks not just that he's within 30,000 pounds of Josh Rock, but that he's 30, 40, maybe even 100,000 pounds ahead of him on current form. It's going to take a lot. Chris Dobey is one of the best players in the world, and it looks like he's only going to go up from here because his game is only continuing to go up from here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it's what a lot of our listeners are thinking as well, because you look at our poll on Twitter at the moment, pretty one-sided. 90% are going with Monday's title winner, Chris Dobey, 10% going with the runner-up, Josh Rock. The poll is going to be open on Twitter all week, so do go and have your say if you've not done so already. And you mentioned there the current the rankings post World Championship, I should say, and around 29,000 pounds between the two players. But the question is, can you see Josh Rock earning that amount more than Chris Dobey over the next 8 months? And going off the last 12 months of stats, and this is via our friends at Darts Oracle, they are 2 of the top 10 performers on the tour in terms of the averages. Chris Dobey 96.58, Josh Rock 95.76, and a smaller sample size going from just this season's matches. Chris Dobey 95.82, Josh Rock 95.05, so the gap a little bit closer there. But I tend to side with our listeners and you here on this one, Burton, and for a lot of it is based on Chris Dobey's run of form in front of the TV cameras. And you look back to last season when he won the Masters, which is an unranked event, but after that, quarterfinals in the match play, the Grand Prix, the European Championships, the World Championships. And I know you've spoken about Chris Dobey's form for a little while, especially in those TV events, and perhaps going under the radar a little bit because he wasn't going further, making finals or winning those big titles, but he was consistently playing at a very high level. And Josh Rock, on the other hand, he did have that quarterfinal at the Grand Slam last year, his first major quarterfinal, but for the most part, he was heading home early in a lot of the other TV events. And he's someone who's kind of been forgotten about a little bit since the Grand Slam, and mainly because of the two Lukes, Luke Littler, Luke Humphries. But go back 18 months or so ago, and the hype surrounding Josh Rock, it was huge. He was going into his first World Championship as the 4th or 5th favourite with the bookmakers. The expectations from the outside now for Josh Rock, they have hit the brakes somewhat, but I know that he still carries that belief that he is going to tick off some of those achievements that the two Lukes have done, get to major finals, win major titles. But I think the safer bet is to go with Chris Dobey being the high ranked player between these two at the end of the season. But that's not to say if things click for Josh Rock, he has got the game to go far, and if he becomes the next major winner, we could see him bypass the top 16 and Chris Dobey and head straight for that top 10 in the world. So I'm going to go with Chris Dobey on this one, but I think getting to a final for Josh Rock, that is a big confidence boost for him, and it could lead on to bigger and better things, but we'll have to wait and see if he can achieve those things this year.
Well, speaking of waiting to see what someone can achieve, a lot of question was what would Luke Humphries achieve as his cameo to winning the world title. Since we last spoke, he is now off the mark for ranking titles this season, winning in Munich on the Euro Tour, and then just hour before we recorded, making the final in Leicester today. Lost that final to Danny Noppert, but is Luke Humphries the best in the world right now?
Yeah, there's a very strong argument that he is. And you mentioned there we didn't record a regular podcast last week, so we did miss out on bigging up Luke Humphries last week, and that jaw-dropping run to the title in Munich over the Easter weekend, the 108, 111 averages, and in that final session, the 106, a 99, and the 112 in the final, an 8-1 demolition of Michael van Gerwen in that game. And just before that, Luke Humphries had won those 3 straight nights in the Premier League to climb to the top of the table, which we'll come on to talk a bit more about later in the show. But it's a remarkable level of consistency that Luke Humphries has been showing of late, and even when he's been losing in the Premier League the last couple of weeks, he's lost that first game, still throwing the high 90 averages. And I watched his game with Michael Smith last week. He had that dreadful start in that one, pulls out the 167 finish, but left himself too much to do. But in the end, averaged 97, which showed you that even though he did have that poor start, he can still bring his game back up to that level, which you'd say is what his B-C game. He can still find those levels even when he's not firing on all cylinders. And you look at his averages, very rarely is his average dipping under the 90 mark, but nowadays it's very rarely dipping under the 95 mark. And I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I'd imagine that very few players out there are matching him on that stat as the player to average 95 plus the most often. And he does hold those 2 most coveted titles in darts right now, the World Championship and that world #1 ranking. They are the 2 biggest indicators for who is the best player in the world, and that's what people are going to look to first for this answer. But then they're going to delve into the stats, the recent form, the recent results, and so on. And he's in that battle now with Luke Littler for that top spot in the Premier League over these next 6 weeks. He's taken the shine off him a little bit, winning those last 2 nights. But I think Luke Humphries, he is that player to beat right now. He's finding those extra gears in matches. He's finding his A game more often. And I mentioned the levels he produced in Munich a few weeks ago. Today, when we're talking that Players' Championship, he had a couple of averages in the 105 pluses, got to the final. Okay, he lost that final with Danny Noppert, 8-6 in the end. But the biggest endorsement for me, saying that Luke Humphries is that #1, the best player right now, it came from the mouth of Michael van Gerwen straight after that final on the Euro Tour. He said on stage, I think at the moment he is the best player and we will have to face it. And then adding, we've got a battle, but he also knows that this run's not going to go on forever. But how often do you hear MVG say that someone else other than himself is the best player in the world? So for me, that's enough to say that, yes, the world #1, the world champion, he is top of the tree on paper, and his darts right now, they're doing the talking as well.
Very much so. And you mentioned that, the 95. I went a little bit lower with what I had noted, but that was just in the Players' Championship events alone. He's averaged over 93 all but twice. One of them was that semifinal against Jan van Veen. What is it about players having lower performances against Van Veen? But even still, despite averaging 8 points fewer than his Dutch opponent, he managed to sneak that one out. And every other match, like you mentioned, over 95. The only other match early in the year, he had a real stinker against Ian White. But most of the time, he's averaging at least 93, and those are the poor matches. And you go back to that Euro Tour at this past weekend, his poor match was the semifinal, where he was absolutely atrocious. Only a 99.93 average against Gerwyn Price. Absolutely terrible performance by Luke Humphries to fall just shy of that 100. Because if you look at the rest of the weekend, he averaged 108.5, 111.5, a tick under 107, and 112.5 in the final. He was as good as anyone's ever been over the course of a weekend. That terrible 99.93 in the semifinal aside, it was one of the most impressive weekends of anyone. And it shows what Luke Humphries does when he gets on that big stage. He lifts his game. Not that he's bad in the Players' Championship events. As we just mentioned, averaging over 93 pretty much every single time he plays in one of those matches. But his performance at the Euro Tour, which he's made his own over the past 24 months, I think answers the question. I think he is the best player in the world right now. He's on the big stage, he's consistent, he's brilliant, he's unplayable when he's playing well, and even when he's playing by his standards poorly, it's still good enough to beat Gerwyn Price 7-3. It's still good enough to steal a last leg decider against a Jan van Veen who's averaging well on 100. That's what he does. And there are players you can make the argument for, Luke Littler, but I think there's still inconsistency in Luke Littler's game. There's still those odd moments where he's just not playing as well. And there's still also those odd moments where he's playing brilliantly, but he just can't figure out a way to get over the line when his opponent is also playing brilliantly. I don't mean these as, as insults against Littler. He's improving, he's figuring it out, he's learning how to have a target, and he's doing it admirably, but there's still inconsistencies in his game. There are none in Luke Humphries' games. There are inconsistencies in Michael Van Guren's games, and we saw that in the final. Yeah, even if he was playing his best, he wasn't going to beat that nearly 113 average that Luke Humphries played at. But he probably would have played better, and he would have pushed Humphries. And maybe Humphries would have buckled, and that 113 would have become 110, and then would have become 106. That's a possibility. Van Guren, though, has too many matches where he just can't get it together, and he just plays 8 or 10 legs. And well, for you or me, it's brilliant. But for a player of his caliber, let alone the player that he used to be, it's not good enough, or at least not consistently good enough. And that's why I think you have to say it's Humphries. He's just always bringing his best, especially on the big stage. And the big stage is where it matters the most. So, yeah, Luke Humphries is the best in the world right now. And maybe there's even a gulf between him and number 2.
And now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show. He is a player on his third run with a PDC Tour card after winning it back at Q School at the start of this year, a 2-time winner on the development tour. Here's our chat with George Killington. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the 2-time winner on the PDC development tour and a tour card holder as well, George Killington. Thanks for the time. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on, and we're talking here at Mission HQ. You've just signed up with Mission as your new darts manufacturer. How pleased are you to now be a part of Team Mission?
Yeah, over the moon. I think it's there's a lot of changes going on in my life, and I think this is a big step forward in my career, and Mission will be able to help with it.
Think of football and the transfer window for players. They're moving clubs. Darts players is a little bit different. There isn't a window. It can happen at any time. So talk us through how this move has come about.
This deal's been in the works for a while now. A lot of respect for Steve, a lot of respect for Daryl, and I think after Q School this year, I was on board. They was on board. It was just a matter of getting it done, and it's finally done now.
Happy days. And the equipment players use is obviously an important part of the game.
Yeah.
So how much thought does go into choosing who you're going to sign up with? What's that process like, deciding where you're going to sign?
It was a big, having Daryl on board, legend that he is, if Daryl was willing to put his trust in the company, then I grew up watching Daryl play darts on telly, so I'd look up to him, and if he's willing to put his trust into the company, then I am as well.
And I mentioned just before we started, you spoke with our colleague Matthew Kiernan briefly at the UK Open last year, but great to get you on the show today for a longer chat and a look back at your darts career so far. So take us back to the start. Where did it all begin?
Earliest memories. My dad was a really, really good county player, and I think I was about 3. I went to watch my dad play against Lancashire. So London to Lancashire is long old trek.
Yeah.
But 3 years old, I was watching him, and I've just grown up. Eventually got a little bit better and better. So. And
you mentioned your dad, Paul. I was reading up on him earlier.
Yeah.
An ex-England international, played pairs with Eric Bristow as well. So I'm guessing he was quite an inspiration for you getting into the darts.
Massively. One of the. I'm lucky. He's my best mate. So my best mate and a teacher. I couldn't have asked for anyone better.
And you mentioned 3 years old going to Oche and play darts. What was that moment like when you finally got a win over him as well? Because I'm guessing every time he didn't want to let you win.
Yeah, 100%. No, he's so competitive. So ironically, I was practicing with him yesterday. Yeah. And he's still competitive as anything. Now that first win, I think I was about 14 when it was a proper win, genuinely like actual Super League win. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was wonderful. But he's still going strong now. So.
Good to hear. And by the time you started playing on the tour, Eric Bristow, he'd long retired, but he was still popular on the exhibitions. Did you get a chance to meet him at all?
No, I didn't. No, my dad obviously played with him a lot over the years, but I think there was an exhibition that my dad went to with him, and it was in a pub where it was 18 plus only, and I was about 15.
Yeah.
So no, I never had the honour.
You mentioned your dad. You followed in his footsteps. He was an England international yourself, playing.
He played an England potential game, I think, which was the equivalent to like the reserves back then. But yeah.
But for yourself, you played England at a youth level, the British internationals. What was that like, putting on the England shirt?
I mean, I had a world record. My debut, I didn't realise about. I had the highest youth international average recorded at the time, but I only found out about it 7 years after I lost it. When Leighton Bennett beat it, that was the day I found out. But no, it was a massive honour, but it's not something I would choose to pursue anymore. I'm glad I had that experience and to be able to play for my country. But now I think darts is in a different world. If you go back 20 years, the honour was astronomical. That was the be all and end all. I think there's so much darts nowadays that I'm glad I've done it, but it wouldn't be an aspiration to go back to that.
Fair enough. Well, let's get on to the PDC side of things, something that you've been involved in. I was looking from a very young age, back to the youth tour. I think you were around 14 or 15.
13. I played my very first one. There used to be no age limit underneath 21. It was 21 and under, that was it, and I was 13.
And I think one of your early games was against Michael Smith.
My very first game. Yeah, my very first game. I lost 3-1. The one leg I won was a 10-darter. Nice. 180, 140, 145 for 86. 15 years ago. I'll never forget that, because it was a massive turning point in my understanding of darts. At 13, I was playing London County A, and I thought I was king of the world. I thought, I'm going to take over. What Dad said, so you're going to go to a youth tournament. I thought, I'm playing men's A. Why am I going to a youth event? I didn't understand it or whatever. I went, I played Michael Smith. I was like, wow, okay, I'm good, but I'm not that good. It was a real eye-opener for me.
Definitely levels, isn't there? And well, you get to a final as well in 2012 on the youth tour. 2 years later, you're winning on the youth tour, winning a title. What do you remember about that first win?
Everything was clicking. Everything was going into place. I travelled up with my mate Lewis Beans, and I knew I could do some damage. I didn't think I was going to win one, but that day I had a couple of 170s out during the games. Everything just went well. There was no... I remember not remembering much, and I wasn't drinking or anything like that. It was pure focus. I was just throwing and hitting on the day. It was strange.
Well, fast forward a few years, 2018, you're at Q School, you're winning your tour card for the first time.
Yeah.
What was it like, that first event, walking into the room with all those big names in there and you were part of it?
Nerve-wracking. Not so much about playing the people. It was I'm sitting on a table with this world champion, that world champion, or they're people that I've loved. As much as I love playing darts, I just love darts. I'm a fan, so I'll always watch darts on telly, and I'm sitting there watching people that I've literally grown up watching on telly. I'm thinking I'm in the same room as these. It was surreal.
And that year you also picked up another title on the development tour, but end of 2019 you finish outside the top 64. But what did you take away from those first 2 years on the tour?
Took away that I was a number in the room, and that was the most demoralising feeling I've ever felt in darts. Obviously, as you said, I won a youth tour that year, so I was still playing okay, but I just wasn't good enough for the Pro Tour. And you're not going to go down to your local open and think, if I win a couple of games today I'll be happy, and that's how I felt. So I decided to take some time away from the professional scene, keep doing everything else. I was still practicing, I just couldn't, and I wasn't confident I was going to win one. So it wasn't the right environment for me at that point.
I was going to say, the next couple of years we don't see you at Q School, but you say you carried on playing at that local level. 2022 you're back at Q School, so what was it that persuaded you to give it another go?
I just thought I was ready. So even though I don't do many local opens, I practice a lot, and I've worked really hard indoors. My partner, she's amazing. She was really encouraging me, telling me to get on the board as well, and I'd practiced really hard, and I thought, okay, I'm ready, and went to Q School, and there was no plan B that year. I had in my head, I'm ready to be back on tour, and I was. So yeah.
Yeah, you had a good couple of years, although you missed out on keeping that tour card. My co-host on our podcast, Burton, he often talks about if players could have a 3-year tour card. It looked like you were starting to get to grips by the end of that second year. You'd have been all right for that third year, but we've seen some great stuff from you, especially we go back to last year. We've only just seen Luke Humphries 112 average in a Euro Tour final.
Yeah.
You beat that 114 average against Damon Hare. That must have been pretty special to do that.
Yeah, it was real. Again, that was another just. You need some reassurance sometimes, not from other people, but from yourself. And I've hit a lot of 100+ averages on tour, but that was a big step. That was the next level, over the 110. And against Damon, and I think he had 104 or something as well, so he wasn't playing bad.
Yeah.
That was a bit like, okay, hang on, when it goes, I can do some damage. So yeah, that was that. Not so much the win, but just everything about that day. That meant a lot to me.
And I mentioned the Euro Tour. We've got to talk about that infamous game with Scott Waits. He hits the 9-darter. You no-sell the celebration with him. But you're not the only one to do that. We see Michael Van Gerwen do it loads of times, but it got a lot of reaction from social media. So talk to us what that was like, because that happened, but then you've got to play the next day as well.
It was horrible. It's the first time I've ever experienced anything like that. I'd like to state for the record, me and Scott get on really, really well, and we was in the back room afterwards having a chat and having a drink together. We're sweet as. But no, to go back to the hotel after my first win on the Euro Tour, and I should be over the moon, seeing a lot of the messages, messaging me, messaging any account that I'm involved in, and just on the PDC website, it hurt. I was like, wow. But you got to try your best to brush it off and just get on with it.
Yeah, a bittersweet moment, I'm guessing. But the next day, what a performance against Dirk van Dijvenbode.
Yeah.
Was it 103, 104 average
something
to
like
beat
that.
him? I mean, to do something like that off the back of that, what happened the day before, that must have meant a lot as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, it's factors of, do I really belong here? And finally doing things like that on the stage. It's, yes, I do belong here. That was a big turning point. That was one of that game was a big factor in me deciding to stop working. I thought if I can do this on the stage, then I just need to get more consistent, and that was a big turning point for me.
Definitely. And I was listening to your interview with Tungsten Tales towards the back end of last year, and you said getting to the World Championship, it's been a dream for yours for a long time. You've come closer a few times, pretty close on the development tour. Last year, the qualifiers, Rusty Jake Rodriguez throwing that 106 average in the final. How tough was that to take, coming so close to getting there?
I was disappointed that I was even in the qualifiers, because I think in the rankings I was only 4 or 5 spots outside of automatic qualification. I needed a good last weekend and I had a bad last weekend, so that hurt. Then going to the qualifiers, everything was going right on the day. 90 average, 100. They was playing really well. Then I ran into a train against Rusty, and it hurt. There was a few tears outside, out in the car park. There was a few tears, but it's life lessons. You step up. What do? Do you stop playing, or do you brush yourself down and try and keep going?
You've definitely come back. You're back on the tour, and you mentioned the work situation as well. You touched on that with the guys at Tungsten Tales. If you were to get your card back, you might have to quit your job as a teacher, although your work has been great with you, but the move to the midweek Pro Tours was going to be a factor. So what is the situation now?
Last Thursday was my last day as a TA. Been there 10 years, so that was my last day. They was as good as they could have been, but it's just too much. But I'm hoping now, with a lot of time to rest and a lot of time to practice properly, it should be a real good push, because there was too much travelling last year and working. Landing off a plane, going straight into work, or straight from work up north to play darts, it was too much. I was physically, my body couldn't have taken much more. So hopefully now rest and proper practice is ready to go.
I know it's only been a week since that last Thursday. Does it feel different being a full-time darts player already?
I've not had time for it to be different yet. I've been busy already. I was doing something last Thursday or last Friday involving darts. I'm now up here. I'll be travelling back tonight, and I think Sunday I go away. So I've not had any time to sit down and do nothing yet. So at this moment in time, I couldn't tell you.
Fair enough. Well, as I mentioned, back to Q School in January, got your tour card back. Not many players we see lose their card, get it back straight away, so a great achievement. But I wanted to also touch on your management. They're with you here today, Zeal Sports Management. I've got to say, a new name for me. I've not heard much about them before, but they've also got James Wade, Jim Williams, a good bunch of players there. So just tell me a little bit more about them.
It was another change in my career. It's just I couldn't say a bad word about any of them, really, to be honest. There's a lot of things in the game where I know darts, but there's a lot of life things, and if this is my full-time job now, it's more than just throwing darts, and I think they're the ones that are going to help push me forward, make sure everything else is okay, so I can just focus on throwing darts, and they're brilliant.
Good times. Well, two more before we let you go, and the most important question we've got to ask you about your nickname as well, Killer. Yeah. We assume it's a play on your last name, Killington, but I'm half hoping it's a tribute to the old TV game show Golden Balls with Jasper Carrot.
No, it's so where obviously my name being Killington, that's where it comes from. The reason it's come about was my dad. When my dad was in school, I think that he said there was 5 or 6 people named Paul. So no one was called Paul in their school. They all had their name, and he was just called Killer because of his nickname. It had nothing to do with darts, just what all of his mates used to call him. And when I started going to darts, I was called Little Killer.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, it wasn't something I wanted on the back of my shirt. It was just his mates then started to call me Little Killer. And when you're 6'1", you can't be called Little Killer anymore. So no, it's off the name, but it's more so my dad's, not me.
Fair enough. And lastly, back to the Pro Tours on Monday. Still early days in the season, but what is the main goal, I guess, for this year? We often hear players say they want to get to the Worlds. First year gives them a good balance going into that second year to keep the card. Is that the goal for you?
Yeah, that's. I mean, whether it's unrealistic or it's not, I'm going to the event to try and win it. Now, that might sound a bit far-fetched and it might be a bit unrealistic, but every tournament I play in, if I think I can win it, I'm going to go to it. If I don't think I can win it, then I'm not going to go. So I'm going to win. Whether that happens or not, we'll find out next week. But no, my main goal for the year is just to get into the World Championships. Need to pick up a little bit now, but I don't think it's unrealistic.
Well, we look forward to finding out. George, pleasure to get you on the show. Appreciate your time. Congratulations on signing for Mission, and wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2024.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to George for joining us now. Moving on to the Premier League. We are 10 weeks into the season now. Luke Littler tops the pile after winning back-to-back nights in Belfast and Manchester last week. But how much have you watched of the Premier League this season, and what have you made of it so far?
How much have I watched? Not really all that much. I did like the first 5 weeks catch a little bit, but I have not even tuned in the last few weeks. And I think that sums up where the Premier League is at right now for darts fans. That's not to say it's a problem, because the Premier League isn't necessarily for darts fans. It's for the wider public. It's for people who otherwise might not really be watching darts. It's certainly not, especially for the people who are subscribing to PDC TV and watching the Pro Tours during a Monday or Tuesday, or watching the Euro Tours on the weekend. And therefore, it's not necessarily a problem, because if the people who Sky are trying to attract, which is the casual viewer who, might just want something to watch on a Thursday evening before they go to bed, then it's not a problem. But for the darts fans, it's a drag, and it's gotten repetitive, and it's gotten redundant. And it's sad because, Luke Littler is such a huge draw, and it did lead me to tune in for the first few weeks of the season to see how he was doing, and to see his progression on the big televised stage in front of tens of thousands of people. But pretty quickly, I got sick of it, because it's the same 8 players playing each other in a tournament each week, and very often the same players ending up playing each other, maybe not every week, but over the course of every 4 or 5 weeks, they're going to play each other 2 or 3 times, especially when you have players going out first round most of the time, like Peter Wright has been so far this year. It's gotten to the point where I just don't care. And that's pretty much it. Is it impressive what Luke Littler has done, winning those back-to-back weeks? Yes. Because then obviously he's playing the best in the world. But add in that means he's beaten Michael Van Geuren twice. He's beaten Luke Humphries once. He's beaten Nathan Aspinall twice. And the other player he played was Gerard Price, who's a bit out of form right now. But he's beating the top players in the world in 5 of those 6, and I'm including Nathan Aspinall in that conversation because Nathan Aspinall's currently in one of the playoff spots. So he's beaten the players who are the best players in this competition in 5 of those 6 matches. That tells you how good he is and how impressive he is. But beyond that, I didn't feel the need to actually watch it. So I don't know what to make about it, make about the season, because I haven't been watching, and I don't think anything's going to make me go out of my way to watch, at least before the playoffs. Maybe the final week, if there's a race to determine who makes the playoffs, I'll tune back in. But until then, I'm done with Premier League season 2024. And I hope that either this is working for the PDC and for Sky, for the audience they're trying to get, or if it's not, or if it's making no difference, that they revert back to the old format or think of something new, because I'd like to watch the Premier League again, but not in this format.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be talking about the Premier League next week, but full disclaimer here, I've only seen the last 2 weeks of the Premier League, and for our listeners who might have been wondering where's the Premier League chat been on the show this year, we usually do our predictions, battle of the co-hosts each week, where we said before the season started we'll skip the first week and see if there is a clamour from you guys to bring it back, and well, there hasn't been, so we've carried on, and it's been quite refreshing not to make a fool of myself with my picks for the Premier League and see how wrong I am each week. But when I was back home over the Easter weekend, I caught most of the night in Belfast, the first nightly win for Luke Littler, and then last week, as you guys know, I was in the media room in Manchester, so saw most of it from backstage. And funny story for you, actually, I mentioned to my nan that I was going to be at the Premier League last week, and when it started on TV, she messaged me and said, let me know where you're sitting so we can spot you on the TV, and I just sent her back a picture from my position in the back row of the media room with the screen in front of me showing the darts, and said you might struggle to find me on the TV, but yeah, it was nice to be involved at one of these Premier League nights. I was trying to think back the last one I've been to, and it was, I want to say, Aberdeen 2020, just before the lockdown. So it's been a few years now, and I saw firsthand last week that increase in media attention. These events go back 4 years, it was much quieter, and it is good to see that interest in the game has picked up. We're seeing more people from the press attending these events, covering them, and long may it continue. And actually, the chat that I had with Matt Porter, he was a busy man that night. He spoke with, I think it was the BBC local radio in Manchester before chatting with me, and then he had another interview after that. So again, you're seeing the boss man of the PDC. He's in high demand for interviews, as are the players as well. And as for the action itself, Luke Littler now top of the table after back-to-back night wins. It looks to be a 2-horse race between the two Lukes for that top spot, just 1 point between them. The current format, 5 points for a win, 6 weeks to go. It's hard to completely rule out things just yet. I guess the only thing we can rule out is that Peter Wright isn't going to make that top 4. But aside from that, everyone else still in with a chance. Rob Cross, Gerwyn Price, they've got a little bit to do. I think they've probably got to win 2 of the 6 nights left to stand a chance of closing that gap on the top 4. But yeah, like you, the Premier League, not something that I'm an avid viewer of week in, week out these days. And I think when we get towards the end, we've got maybe 1 or 2 weeks left, we'll start to bring it back on the show and talk more about who's going to make the playoffs. And then, of course, I think everyone watches the playoffs to see who is the eventual champion and see if Michael van Gerwen's recent dominance of the Premier League can be stopped.
Well, let's move back to talking about darts. The darts just keeps on coming with the Euro Tour and the CDC curtain raiser, which you'll hear more about in about 6-7 minutes from now. But the CDC curtain raiser, the cross-border challenge, what takes your eye from the lineup this weekend?
Well, I'll start with that CDC cross-border challenge, and I think it's a sign of the progress that the CDC are making, that you put together a 16-player tournament. You've got 8 Americans, 8 Canadians, and looking at that lineup, I'd say 12, maybe 13 of them, I recognise them. I've seen them play, whether that be on TV or a stream. I know who they are, and if you'd have put a similar event together maybe 10 years ago, as much as I am a darts anorak like you are, Burton, I think that figure for players that I knew or recognised would have been easily less than half, maybe 4 or 5 out of the 16. So I think it's great to see that exposure for North American players. It's continuing to grow. We're learning more about these players. We're seeing them more often, whether that be in the World Championships, the Grand Slam, the CDC events, which are streamed now as well. You've got the Modus Super Series, the seniors. There's lots going on now. The North Americans, they are part of it. And this event, the Cross Border Challenge, the second year we've had it, it was streamed on YouTube last year. It's going to be on YouTube again this weekend. So along with it being on the PDC's streaming platform, it is going to be more readily available on YouTube. So it does bring a wider audience. And I've got to say, as a one-off event, going up against the first 2 days of the Euro Tour, the draw's not out for that event yet. But right now, if I had to choose one event to watch, I would be more inclined to follow this one, those couple of days, Friday and Saturday. You've got, looking at the first round, Stowe Buntz, good friend of the show, against John Park, one of the legends of the game. That's the pick of those first round ties on the Friday. But that final day, quarterfinals played down to a finish on Saturday. There is potential, I think, for some really exciting matchups there. So for me, yeah, the cross-border challenge, something I'm looking to watch this weekend. As for the Euro Tour out in Riesa, we know what we're going to get with that. Almost all of the top 32 are involved, and many of them are going to be starting out in that first round on the Friday. So there is that prospect of some blockbuster ties on the first day and that second day as well. But it is too early in the week for us on this Tuesday evening. We've not got a full draw bracket to look at, but with the lineup of players, you are almost guaranteed entertainment, aren't you? So just having a quick look down that list of players, some players from that, I want to say the tour card qualifiers, because one name that sticks out, Owen Bates, I believe it's a first appearance on the Euro Tour for him this weekend. So we're going to see if he can master the Euro Tour on his debut. And one other name as well, actually, Mervyn King, a former winner on the Euro Tour in its early days. Had to double check this. It didn't qualify for any of the Euro Tours in 2023. Played in all of the qualifiers, lost in 7 finals. So it's a long overdue return to the Euro Tour for the King this weekend, which I'm looking forward to seeing as well.
I mean, we'll be hearing from Peter Citera in just a minute, and he'll talk more about what's coming up in the CDC. But like you said, I'm really excited. And, obviously some of these names nobody would have known about a few years ago, not just because the CDC had less attention, but some of these players weren't playing as much. But even if we were to take who were the 16 best in the CDC 3-4 years ago and do this tournament, the average darts player would not have heard of most of those players. And now they have. There's 2 tour card holders in this field. There's plenty of other players who have made a mark for themselves in the World Championships or in other events over in the PDC. And I shouldn't say just in the PDC, because you added Leonard Gates as well in the Senior Tour. And there's some matchups that from the very first round you're going to want to watch. You mentioned the Stowe Buntz John Part match, but I'll add in David Cameron against Doug Boehm, Jim Long against Jason Brandon, Jacob Taylor against Larry Butler. Okay, Larry Butler's not the player he used to be. He's getting up there in ages, but he can still turn back the clock and bring a really good performance. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this event over the couple days, Friday, Saturday. Maybe I will try to get to Michigan City, Indiana. Never been there, never would have thought I would want to go there, but maybe it'll be fun to go to see this if it weren't for the fact that it's pretty short notice to get there. The best tour in the world, and not just in darts, but in sports, as Dan Dawson would say, is the European Tour. And it should be another really good weekend. And Riesa is, in fact, the first place that I ever went to a professional darts event. It's also where Mensur Suljovic won his first title. So it's a very important place for me. And to watch this event each year brings back some memories. It's also one of the oldest now Euro Tour events, other than obviously during COVID, on the calendar every year as the International Darts Open in Riesa. Seeing, as you mentioned, the return of Mervyn King, also some players like Cameron Menzies, who's trying to chase down a spot in the world match play, I think is going to be big. But I also am curious to see how some of the players who need a big weekend, who've been struggling among those order of merit qualifiers, do. James Wade is in serious jeopardy of missing the world match play for the first time. He's never been outside the top 16 since he made that first run to the final 18 years ago, let alone been in danger of missing it through the Pro Tour order merit. Well, now he's in both of those. But Jose de Sousa is in danger of dropping out of the seeds. Even Dirk van Dijvenbode, who's currently the 5th seed, if he falls out of the top 16 overall because of how poor his second half of 2024 was, he would also miss out on the world match play. So there's a lot at stake for some of these players, not just through the tour card qualifiers, but among the order of merit and seeded players as well. So there's a lot to look forward to this weekend, whether you're watching darts in North America, darts in East Germany, or both.
And now we'll move on to our final guest on this week's show. Great to get him back on. He is the CEO of the Championship Darts Corporation. Here's our chat with Peter Citera.
We're joined today by Peter Citera, the CEO of the Championship Darts Corporation. Peter, thanks for joining us again. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Burton. Thanks for having me on. It's always good to catch up with you.
And it's great to get you back on the show. We're now just a few days before the second staging of the CDC Cross-Border Challenge. 8 Americans, 8 from some other country that I won't mention, to kick things off on Friday. How's the preparation going for the event as we edge closer to the weekend?
You know, I don't think there's anything that truly will make you feel like you're 100% prepared and ready to go. Matter of fact, I think if you feel that way, it's probably an indicator that something's going to go catastrophically wrong. So, you know, we're as confident as we can be. Things are getting buttoned up as we speak. We'll be beginning our setup, on the Tuesday into the Wednesday. And so we've got plenty of lead time. Our production team is fantastic. And I know they'll have things ready to go for us.
And we were just talking off air before we started. The last time we had you on the show, Peter, was with my co-host Burton almost a year ago, just before the first cross-border challenge, Jeff Smith dominating the weekend to win the title. What were your reflections on how that first edition of this new event played out?
You know, that first edition, anytime you bring something new to market, there's always a sense that you're just not prepared, not ready. And I think we dispelled those fears pretty quickly. I'm not sure how obvious it was to people remotely, but we worked through a whole bunch of issues that came up that you just can't prepare for. For example, we had a storm and the building was struck by lightning, and all the power went out. This is in the middle of a match, so I guess it was kind of trial by fire. But it was certainly well received. The audience in the room, the crowd was electric last year. It really felt like, a top tier professional event. There were people dressed up, fancy dresses, you would say, over in the UK. There was cheering. It was just a great atmosphere. And, obviously Jeff is a well-known player. Having him come through and be champion of that event certainly brought some real eyeballs to us and some good coverage. And, that's certainly appreciated as well.
As I said before we started, Alex wrote these questions because I would never joke about women's hockey, but I'll read what he wrote. This is a unique event with it starting off 8 Americans against 8 Canadians and points on offer for the Nations Cup. I remember that I joked last time about women's hockey result at the time, and that must have inspired the Canadians because they cruised to the title. Although there's a title on the line, the American players will be hungry for revenge this weekend, won't they?
I would certainly hope so. Last year, adding that elements of team play, even though it's not a team event, adding that element of playing for your country always brings a new dynamic and a sense of pride. And so I know that the U.S. team was certainly left licking its wounds a little bit last year, and I know there's a fire under the Americans to kind of come back and show the naysayers what can be done.
And just lastly on that cross-border challenge, it's a new location this year as well. You've moved from Jersey City to Michigan. What was behind the move?
We've moved to Michigan City, Indiana at Uptown Social. We are always looking for new venues. We're always looking to expand our footprint and see where we can kind of bring things into play and attract new audiences. We loved the White Eagle Hall. There's no doubt about it. It was a fantastic venue. Everybody who was there raved about it. And, we'd love to go back. But unfortunately, scheduling and the financial side of things, it didn't work out at White Eagle this year. So we made a mutual decision that it wasn't the right time to go back. Left friends, parted friends. I can see us absolutely going back there in the future for this event or something else. And I know they'd love to have us back. But, the Uptown Social, we kind of just in the travels of trying to find new venues, it kind of fell into our lap. One of our good friends from the Bulls movie that's being filmed kind of tipped us off to it. And I went over there and went through it and just fell in love with the venue. Similar feel to the White Eagle Hall, a little bit more intimate, but very much, they've got the balcony, it's got the lighting we need, it's got the sound. I don't think you'll think this is anything other than a massively professional venue if you're on location.
Well, of course, it's not just the cross-border challenge this weekend, but also filming for a new darts film, Bulls, directed by Dan Meyer. What can you tell us about that?
So, the Bulls folks have been amazing, and I just mentioned in my last response that we've been working pretty closely with them. I don't want to go too in-depth into the plot of the movie and spoil anything, but suffice it to say they put together a pretty good screenplay. I think it's going to showcase the sport in a very positive light, although I will mention that the game they're playing in this movie, the game that's featured, is not 501. It's cricket. So it's kind of interesting for people that are more purists of the game might take a little step back and go, wow, But here in the U.S., of course, cricket is a huge game, and that's kind of why that's featured. But that team has put in, talk about facing adversity. They were ready to go, and then there was an actor's strike, and there was a writer's strike. And, just as they were about to film production, they got that wrench thrown into their plans. And so, they've kind of, like us, been flying the plane as they're building it. And, filming started last week. It's, by all accounts, going very well. And they'll actually be filming in our venue after we're done with the cross-border. Matter of fact, again, not to give so much away, but I think that CDC might be featured, in that film, product placement, if you will.
Very nice. Well, it could be an Oscar coming your way, Peter. We shall see. Well, let's look back at the rest of last year, and we've got to start with a player that enjoyed a breakthrough 2023. We both know him well, Stowe Buntz. He won 3 events in a weekend, the Continental Cup, to get to Ali Pali and make the quarterfinals of the Grand Slam. Just how impressed were you with the Neon Nightmares emergence last year?
You and I talked about that actually in Wolverhampton, Alex. I was so stoked for Stowe for a number of reasons. He's been around the game for a long time, took a little bit of time off. He's a family guy, just lives and dies with his wife and his kids. And to see him achieve what he achieved, knowing that darts is really not his number one focus, or certainly wasn't last year, is nothing short of astounding, right? Sometimes, and I think that in sport, a lot, especially individual sport, you can generally point to a moment in somebody's career where you go, just wow, like this is the catapult, this is the springboard. And for Stowe, it was that triple header victory last year in CDC that got him there. He's always been a confident player. He's a good scorer, and finding the doubles consistently was the last piece. And he put that together in the CDC weekend, and we all saw what happened in the Grand Slam in Wolverhampton. It couldn't happen to a nicer guy, and he's a great representative for CDC, but just in general for North America and the game here.
His run to the quarterfinals in Wolverhampton wasn't the only big surprise of the weekend, or of the week, I should say, in Wolverhampton, because you also had an unexpected meeting in person with my co-host, Alex. We asked Stowe this question, so we'll ask it to you as well. What was your highlight of that Saturday night? Stowe beating Peter Wright with the 102 average, or Alex buying you a beer?
Well, if you'd asked me beforehand which one would have been more likely, I might have gone with the 102 average. So we're going to go with Alex buying me the beer. That certainly was the highlight.
I've known him for 8 years. That certainly is more likely than him buying someone a beer.
Wow, you've both done me dirty there. But no, it was great to meet you in person, Peter, as Burton mentioned there. And we also saw Stowe open up the World Championship after that as well. But it was Matt Campbell who captured the North American interest at Ali Pali last year. 2 wins to make that third round where he come unstuck like a lot of people did against Luke Littler. What did you make of Matt's run at Ali Pali?
First of all, I don't know if you got the number of the bus that we just threw you under, Alex, but if you did, certainly I'll be happy to talk to the driver.
Cheers, mate.
Matt's, he needed that. Last year wasn't. I think if you went and talked to him about his play last year, it wasn't where he wanted it to be. So having that run certainly, I think, was big for him just as a player in seeing where his game was and the fact that he still had it, was able to do that and kind of turn it on. There was some controversy externally. One of the kind of the, I'll call it the tabloid dart sites, tried to kind of incite some controversy in a match where there shouldn't have been any. And I think he used that to really light a fire under himself. And you saw he wasn't going to take no for an answer until, of course, he got to Luke. And I don't care how long you say you're not going to take no for an answer. When Luke Littler's involved, if he's firing on all cylinders, you're not going to have a lot of say in that, right? We've all seen what he's capable of and where his game is. But overall, I couldn't be happier for Matt making that round, and hopefully we'll start to see his game again come together this year, and he makes another march to not only get the World Championship but retain his card.
Now, when we last had you on, you mentioned the launch of a new affiliate organization, the Championship Darts Latin America and Caribbean Tour, thankfully known as the CDLC for short. We just had a qualifier for the World Cup and 2 weekends of events for a spot at Ali Pali. How did you reflect on the first year of CDLC events?
It's a work in progress. It's wonderful to have the affiliate kind of going into a new region. Especially one, we've got now essentially the entire hemisphere here is rolled up professional darts under CDC or our affiliate CDLC, which rolls up under CDC. And so, adding another continent essentially, which is what we did, is certainly not an easy task. It was amazing in a lot of ways that we were able to pull that together. That region of the world is really ripe, I believe, for darts to kind of get on the map. And I've said this in other interviews, and I'll say it again because I firmly believe it, in that they experience sport much more like the way Europeans experience sport. It's much more active consumers of sport, whereas here in North America, we're more passive. Go to a baseball game, you'll sit on your hands talking to the person next to you until something happens. Then you get up and cheer, then you sit back down and talk again. It's just the way we look at sport. It's totally different from that. So because they have that passionate connection to sport, and also because there's fewer sports out there to compete with. Here we've got, especially in the U.S., we've got sport all over the world, all over the map, right? NFL, NBA, MLB, you name it, MLS, NHL, so darts can kind of get lost. There's less of that in that region. So I think that certainly we're going to kind of push that and get the sport where I think it belongs. That being said, it's a long road. The talent level there is not commensurate with the talent level here in North America yet, and that's fine. They haven't had the grassroots efforts, right? So, we're really trying to push development inside the different countries, and there's a language barrier in some cases because most of us speak English and a lot of there's Spanish speakers. So there's a lot of challenges to it. But you mentioned we had 2 weekends. We did. We sent Norman Madhu to the Ali Pali. We sent Norman Madhu and Sudesh Fitzgerald to the World Cup. And we just had our qualifier for this year, matter of fact, just last weekend. And Team Guyana, Norman Madhu and Sudesh Fitzgerald, qualified again. So you'll see them back at the Eisbertal in Frankfurt for the World Cup, and we're excited about that. This year we're looking forward to. Still, we're going to have 2 weekends. We're going to Jamaica, so we're adding a new nation, and then we'll be back in Chile for the second weekend. And right now, going on a little bit, but right now we're also planning an expansion in 2025, probably adding another weekend in another country. So it's a work in progress, but it really is, a kind of a passion project for us. And especially, I know, for my associate, Jeff Good, who kind of spearheads things down there.
Definitely keep up the good work with that. And we were going to mention that qualified this past weekend, Sudesh and Norman winning through it again. But we wanted to bring up the runners-up from that qualifier, Norwin Jimenez and Gerald Ordenana from Nicaragua, not a country we've associated with darts before. So what can you tell us about it, or I guess any of those countries that you've started working with that maybe do have that growing dart scene already?
Yeah, so, in the darts world, there's really none of those countries that are known quantities in our sport. There just isn't. Darts is kind of spread out. Number one, a lot of these countries, the infrastructure in terms of getting from place to place is a little bit more difficult than it is, certainly here in the United States. So players have a tougher time sometimes, because there's fewer of them and maybe difficult to travel, of getting, kind of face-to-face as often as they probably need to elevate their game, which is part of what we're trying to do with CDLC, right? That's one of the keys of expansion, is to get them to beat up on each other, obviously in a not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense. That'll make them better. Nicaragua, before last year, I would have told you that darts didn't exist in Nicaragua. But here we are, and Norwin's a great player. He'll be an up and coming player. You'll hear that name again. Costa Rica has a vibrant dart scene, and it's grown pretty much exponentially in the last few years. So you'll hear, guys like, Guillermo Soto, we call Mimo, or Alex Gutierrez. There's just a number of different players that you'll start hearing from more and more often as we're able to stage more of these events. There's countries that'll start popping up. Chile, certainly we've had teams from Colombia. Panama has been a stalwart supporter of what we're trying to do. And we're really trying to now bring in some of the Caribbean countries, Jamaica and the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands, and, a bunch of those little kind of smaller nations in the Caribbean, to try to get them on board too. Hence the fact that we're going to be in Jamaica.
Well, I know there's at least one dartboard in the country of Guatemala, because I played darts when I was there on holiday a few years ago. Possibly the worst dartboard I've ever played on, but another country to expand to in the future.
Just in Guatemala, actually, I was on a cruise. I was just in Guatemala about 10 days ago. Fantastic country, wonderful people.
Agree, and I need to get back. It's been a while, although last time I went, I came back and I was ill for the next 6 weeks. But that's a different story. Let's circle back.
Don't drink the water, Burton. Don't drink the water.
Let's circle. Well, I live in D.C. and I'm used to that advice. Let's circle back though to the CDC in a milestone year. This is the 10th year of the CDC. A few changes though to bring up for 2024. Firstly, the player who tops the points on the CDC rankings will get an automatic spot straight through to the final stage of PDC Q School. How much of a step forward is that for the CDC?
I think it's wonderful. It recognizes the leaps and bounds that we've advanced the game here in North America over the last 10 years. A lot of talk has been made in the darts media about, the players that you're Stowe Buntz and Alex Spellman and Danny Lobby and Matt Campbell and Jeff Smith. There's been a lot of focus on these players. Obviously, we can't take credit for Jeff Smith. He's been a fantastic player forever. But, those others came through our system. And to see them reward us with that berth in that second round and not having to play the first stage of Q School for that is just another, I think, feather in our cap.
And another change to the schedule is the main tour for the CDC has gone up from 4 to 5 weekends, starting in Brownsburg next month. How excited are you for this new season to begin?
If you'd have told me 10 years ago that we would be here now, I would have probably given you about a 60% chance that you were smoking something you shouldn't have been smoking. But here we are. It's been a long and winding road, but I think we're stronger than ever, and we're trying to add events and add opportunities for players. You'll see us do more of that, in the coming years. We've got big plans that I can't really reveal much of here, but to expand the tour again. So, we're all in on this. And, I think that it's I don't know how to say this I don't want to sound arrogant, but it's impossible to look at the state of darts in North America right now and not at least give some shout to us and the efforts that we've put in to get the sport here. And so now, the next challenge is to bring the recreational fan in. And that's why we're doing the cross border. That's why we'll move the Continental Cup, and we'll do those in nice, bigger venues. Obviously, you've seen the results at the Madison Square Garden. Ticket sales are fantastic. They're ahead of last year by 1,000 tickets at this point. So darts is starting to become a thing here. And, the work isn't done. There's a lot of hard work left ahead. But if you'd have told me 10 years ago that we'd be where we are now, I would have been just happy as a pig in slop. And so, here we are.
It's a busy period for the CDC. Q School to play on the main tour has already started, but still more Q School events coming up over the next 3 weekends. Can you tell our listeners, as well as any players out there in North America who want to get involved, how does the CDC Q School work, and how do they go about joining the tour?
Sure. So we try to partner with events where there's going to be a substantial, presence, larger tournaments that are, holding events on a weekend, so that we can kind of utilize their infrastructure and hopefully bring more players who are interested in getting on our tour to their event. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship, if you will. And so, we've got 2 more live in-person Q schools coming up. One of them is in Canada, the Demolition Darts Derby. That's coming up, matter of fact, this weekend. And then we've got the Early Bird event in the U.S. South, Mississippi, that is going to be towards the end of the month. So if you're interested, champdarts.com. We've got a Q School page. You can go get all the details there. In addition, we've recently added a virtual Q School for those who might not be able to get out to some of these events. Maybe they're not local to the events, not planning on going, or just have scheduling conflicts. So we've got a virtual Q School coming up in a few weeks as well, to be able to try to qualify from home. Obviously cameras and there'll be officials monitoring. So we're trying to preserve, of course, integrity of online play, but it does give players who might not otherwise have a chance the opportunity to play and compete to try to earn their tour card.
Just a few more before we let you go, Peter, and we talk about the CDC growing. You now also have your own official podcast as well, Shooting Bull. We'll put a link in our description for our listeners to go and check it out. But how's that gone so far?
I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was on my list of things to cover. So, certainly we're ecstatic about the fact that we've had the ability to bring it to fans. It's like anything else. You start kind of slow and you start then picking up. So right now we're running monthly, and I can see us certainly start to do much more frequently than that. We've brought on Anthony Eugenie as our host, my partner, Anthony Eugenie. He's done a brilliant job kind of planning it and assisting with the guests and trying to figure out what topics we're covering and how we're going. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we brought on somebody to assist us in the marketing and the podcast production by the name of KJ McGlynn. And she's done a wonderful job also working with Anthony to get that to the point where it's ready to go out to the world. I was lucky enough to be a guest on the inaugural podcast. I hope they'll have me back. Not sure, but it was a really enjoyable experience to sit down with Anthony and our other partner, L. David Irete, and just kind of reminisce about the first 10 years and the state of the game. Matter of fact, there's a preview episode. So if you're interested in podcasts, there's a preview episode for the Cross Border Darts Challenge that will drop tonight, as a matter of fact. So by the time this interview airs, it will be available on all of your favorite podcast networks.
Beyond this weekend, lots still to come for North American darts this year. One of the highlights being the World Series at Madison Square Garden, starting the day after my birthday and ending 2 days after my birthday. So I'll count it as my birthday weekend. What's the interest been like?
And Burton, to be fair, that's exactly why they moved the date. It's because of your birthday. They wanted to help you celebrate.
I know that. I knew that they're pulling out all the stops to make sure I finally show up. So what has the interest been like for this year's event, especially off the back of Luke Littler's exploits over the past few months?
It's I think I mentioned a little earlier. It's wonderful. The ticket sales are up. Saturday night, I anticipate that every seat in that theater will be full. Last year we almost packed it. I pretty much guarantee we'll be sold out this year. We're starting to see more interest in the Friday sessions. So the word has gotten out that that's the place to be if you're a darts fan. And more importantly, Luke Littler is starting to get coverage, here in North America consistently. We've had darts coverage in North America, by mainstream media occasionally. Fallon Sherrick, of course, got a lot of airplay. The World Championship typically does get some sort of mention on the larger sports podcasts and sports networks here. But Luke Littler is now a regular topic of discussion on some of the leading sports podcasts. And that's, again, that can be the catalyst for just more growth for darts here. And I think people are just recreational. Maybe they didn't know much about darts. Oh, hey, who's this Luke Littler kid? Oh, he's pretty good. Oh, wow. Hey, there's an event at Madison Square Garden. Why don't we go out and kind of see what it's all about? I think there's an element of that as well. There's no doubt about it. But again, let's bring that back to CDC. That's the energy that we need to capture to bring into our staged events as well. And that's why we continue to do them and plan them and execute them, is to really, again, make darts more of a mainstream sport here in the U.S. and in North America in general.
Well, I'm not sure who's the biggest draw for all those extra tickets being sold this year, Luke Littler or the rumours that Burton DeWitt's going to be attending the Madison Square Garden this year. But lastly, when we last had you on, you mentioned Anthony Eugenia, the Chief Operating Officer of the CDC. He's got a legendary notebook with lots of ideas and possible future events. Can you give us any sneak peeks of what could be on the horizon from the CDC?
Right now, nothing I can really mention publicly. I will mention that in the next day or so, we're going to have a fairly significant announcement, not necessarily event related, but fairly significant announcement I think people will be interested in, but nothing I can let slip at the moment. You'll have to have me back on later in the year if you'd like to discuss some of the things we'll be trying to do.
Well, that's one way to sell yourself another spot on this podcast. I will have to take you up on that.
Burton, if you're not fighting, you're never gonna succeed. This is the place to be in darts media. At least that's what everybody says. So I want to make sure I'm back on.
Well, thank you. We hope everyone's right, and thank you so much for your time.
Sincerely appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, gentlemen.
Thanks again to Peter for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with the mailbag. We've got a couple of questions before we go. The first one comes from Henry Deacon. He says, apart from Jimmy Vansky, what else is effing massive?
Yeah, well, you're not going to give away our clean rating on iTunes and give the exact quote?
I'll try not to.
Ooh, well, I mean, I think you just heard it from Peter Citera. I think it's us. We're the place to be in darts. So I think it's the weekly Dartscast. But if it's not the weekly Dartscast, maybe it's just the CDC, because it was nothing a decade ago. Literally only came into existence 10 years ago. And boy, has it grown and proven to produce some very good darts players, not just at the CDC level, but as we've seen from Danny Larrabee, as we've seen from Jules Van Dong, and as we've seen from Jeff Smith and Matt Campbell on the world stage as well. And plenty of others who have come through the CDC system and then transferred those skills and improved at the world level. So I think what's massive? Well, us, obviously, as Peter Cetera said, but even more so, the CDC.
Yeah, can't argue with that. You just heard from Peter Cetera saying that the weekly Dartscast, the place to be in darts media. Thanks very much for the kind words, Peter. And yeah, with the question from Henry, I did laugh at this one, and I do dip in and out of the Modus Super Series, but I did catch that 9-dart shootout on Saturday. That was definitely massive in terms of drama. I think it's only happened 3 times in all the series that they've been doing so far, and that Saturday night final, if you don't watch the Modus, it is 6 players split into 2 groups of 3, and you get a 9-dart shootout. If all the results in one group go the same scoreline, and each player picks up a win and a defeat. So yeah, I think it's only happened on a few occasions, but that was dramatic. Darryl Pilgrim hitting a 180 but he was the player to miss out. The two players with the highest score going through, they all finished in third place unbelievably. Jimmy Van Schie coming through it and winning the night in the end, and that's where we got that infamous line from him in the winners interview. So apart from Jimmy Van Schie, 9 dart shootouts, us of course the CDC. When I was making these notes, it was before kick-off on the Tuesday night football, so I was hoping by this point that I could say my team Colchester United, because they are playing tonight, but as we are recording, they are drawing 0-0, so fingers crossed they can keep that result. I'd be happy with it. So if they can, I'm going to add Colchester United to that list.
Well, fingers crossed on that one. But one more listener question, and this one comes from Ken. How do you improve your third dart?
Well, it's not often we get asked on the show for actual darts advice, but we'll do our best for you, Kian. And how about we do a deal? If we help you improve your third dart, you can help me improve my first and second dart. But no, all joking aside, it can be difficult, that third dart, especially if you are going for a 180. And for me, I no longer have that problem, because if I've hitting 2 treble 20s and then shanking that last dart somewhere else, because my bottle goes after I hit 1 treble 20 these days. But the only advice I can give is repetition. If you don't overthink that last dart, try and replicate the same throw, the same process you did for the first 2 darts for that last dart. And yeah, easier said than done. If you are looking at a dartboard with 2 treble 20s in it, you're trying your best to get that maximum, get the 180. Sometimes you can rush the last dart, you're eager to get the 180, or you overthink it, you don't throw it correctly. So as an amateur player myself, my advice is just try and stay calm, relax, try not to overthink it, pretend it's not your last dart. And I do know some players I've seen in the past, I think they've maybe held a pen in their non-throwing hand. So you've got the 3 darts, you've got the pen in there. So when they are throwing that last dart, they have still got something they're holding on to in their other hand. So it can be maybe a psychological thing. It can work for some players. So maybe that could be something to try out. But good luck with whatever you do, Kian. And most importantly, enjoy the darts.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different approach to the answer. I've definitely improved significantly over the last few months. Part of that I do think is switching to a set of darts that more correctly matches my grip and style. But I think how you improve your third dart the most is by improving your first dart. I think the first dart is the most important one, because especially as you get better at grouping, especially as you get better at using the dart in the board as a marker, if your first dart goes in a good place, it's much easier to throw that second and third dart. And it makes a huge difference to not worry about the third dart, but to worry about the first dart, and to have that confidence that if you have a good first dart, then you've already done 50% of the work. If you haven't, if that first dart is bad, then each other dart is going to have to be 50%. And in the end, if you have 2 bad darts, you're having to throw 150% of your effort in a visit. All the effort should go into improving that first dart, to getting it so that as more often than not, it's getting where you want it, or at least in a place where if it's not where you want it, it's where you can work. So I think that's the key. Work on the first dart and let the second and third dart follow through. And to add to that, one thing that I've also worked on in practice, if I get a bad first dart sometimes, I just then try to see, can I follow it? I've had a dart square into single 5. I'm not going to even practice trying to calibrate on it. I use it in a situation where there's no pressure to work on my grouping. I have a terrible dart, but I have that line. Let me see if my second and third dart can go exactly there, so that when I do get that good first dart, I'm already used to just letting it flow without there being any pressure. Anything else for this week?
Some good advice there. Well, I've already said my sign off, but I will repeat it again in a moment. A few thank yous before then, though. Thank you to our guests for joining us, to George and Peter for their time. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner and Condor Darts, for their support. Links in the description. Do go and check them out. We don't often talk about the actual darts themselves, but I did see one of our sponsors, Condor. They are releasing the Condor Axe 120, which is a free fin flight and 20% more durable than the Condor Axe, due to be released on the 20th of April. So something innovative from Condor, worth checking out in a week or so's time. And thank you to our listeners as well. We appreciate the support. Thank you for listening. And until next week, if you're playing darts, if you're watching darts, plenty to watch over the weekend, but there is only one thing to do, and that is make sure you enjoy the darts.
And hang tight until you do that. Thanks everyone for listening. Let us know if there's any, keep the questions coming, and let us know if there's anything else you want us to talk about, anyone you want us to interview. We've gotten most of the tour card holders on now, but there's still a few to go, and there's plenty of other players and people in World Darts. So keep your suggestions coming. Hang tight to see what it comes next from us. And as Alex says, enjoy the darts.